So let's hear it for our choir and for Matt Corey and Becky Thatcher. Thank you. So this is the fourth Sunday of Advent, and it marks the arrival of wonder, of awe, of the Christ, of awakening. And so we take this journey to Bethlehem that leads to the awakening of the birth of the Christ within. In Luke chapter 2, verse 6, we read, "While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them at the inn." And so we have arrived at the moment that we've been waiting for. And I have to digress for a minute because I did see a little cartoon about Mary and Joseph, and they're in the manger, they're in the stable, and Joseph is apologizing because he forgot to make reservations. And he goes, "Mary, I'm really sorry. I know I should have made reservations and I didn't." And the caption at the bottom said, "The real reason behind Silent Night." And some of you will know what that means. So although we celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th, the truth is he probably was not born on December 25th. By all accounts, it appears that he was born in the spring. But if you were a Christian back in those days, it was very dangerous because they were being persecuted. And so they had to secretly worship the birth of Jesus so that they would not be caught and persecuted. And so what they did is they folded their celebration into Roman celebrations, one of which was the solstice, of course, but the other was Saturnalia. And Saturnalia was this huge holiday that was a bit like Mardi Gras, right? And it started on December 17th, and it was so much fun that they ended up extending it for 5 days and then 7 days. And it was quite a festival. They would go to the temple of Saturn and untie the statue, and then all things Saturn came to a halt, right? So businesses were closed, schools were closed, courts were closed, and everything got turned upside down. Slaves and masters changed places. And many of the traditions of Saturnalia became absorbed by the traditions that we celebrate with the Christmas holiday, with singing and gift-giving and feasting and merrymaking and lighting of candles. Back in the day, people decorated their homes with greenery. They shed their plain old togas for bright-colored clothes, like we wear our Christmas sweaters, right? And we wear our glittery stuff around Christmas. Ornaments were placed in trees in the shape of sun and stars, and of course it wasn't until later that the trees were brought into the house. And one of the greetings of Saturnalia was yo, 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 Saturnalia, yo, Saturnalia, ho, ho, ho. So, we could see all these roots of these pagan celebrations being absorbed by Christmas. Another part of Saturnalia was that each household would choose a king of chaos or the king of misrule. And his job was to make mischief, to wear crazy clothing, to insult guests. And so no wonder Christmas was celebrated during this period, because everybody was so into partying and probably so drunk that they didn't notice that the Christians were also having their own celebration and celebrating the birth of the Christ. So in unity, of course, when we look at what does this mean, what does it mean to birth the Christ, it's about celebrating the birth of the Christ, not only without, but also within all beings. And I want to share with you some of what Charles Fillmore said about this, Charles Fillmore being the co-founder of Unity. He said, "Look at yourself not as flesh and blood, but as spirit. Christ is the cosmic man. Christ is the cosmic woman." So we are celebrating the fact that we are cosmic beings, if you will. He said that Jehovah in the Old Testament represents the I am, or the invisible. And the Messiah represents the promise of this invisible to be visible. And Jesus Christ is the fulfillment in men and women of the original I am. So, Jehovah, I am, the Spirit, the Messiah, the promise of that manifestation, and the birth of Jesus Christ is the symbology behind that is it is made manifest through each one of us. It is made manifest through men, through women, through this planet. Now, Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit priest who lived in the first part of the 20th century, he died in, I believe, the mid-50s, said similar things. Whereas Charles Fillmore said, look at yourself not as flesh and blood, but as of spirit, Teilhard de Chardin said, you are the body of God. And he said that matter is not a distraction from God, because in traditional Christianity, it's more like, and even in Hinduism, it's like in Buddhism, we have to overcome the world, right? We have to detach from the world. We have to rise above that. And he said that matter isn't a distraction from God, but it's the outworking of the life of God in form. And it is a cosmic incarnation. So traditionally, we look upward, right, at spirit, and then downward to the earth. And Teilhard de Chardin is saying, rather than just upward and downward, let there be a forward movement. Let it be united in a forward movement and an evolving universe. So together, we drive the universe forward toward what it is becoming. And this is what the Christmas story is about. It's about an initiation. So it's not about an ascent to God, but a path that's flowing out from God as God flows more fully into form. Teilhard de Chardin said this, that someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then for a second time in the history of the world, humankind will have discovered fire. So it's love, right? It's about this manifestation of love, about kindness, compassion. And he said the next evolutionary leap is the Christification of the human species. Now you may be saying, well, that's just well and fine, but have you seen the world lately? And where is this Christification? Where is this evolving that we are talking about so much? And Teilhard de Chardin spoke to that as well. He said, above all, trust in the slow work of God. We are quite naturally impatient in everything to reach without delay. We would like to skip the intermediate stages. Wouldn't you always like to skip the intermediate stages and just master something and be done with it, right? He said, we are impatient of being on the way to something unknown, something new, and yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stage of instability, and that it may take a long time. So above all, trust in the slow work of God. So even if it looks like nothing is happening, it's happening. Every time you have an act of kindness and compassion and a kind word and expand your consciousness and your love, you're helping to shift the consciousness of the planet. So, again, this is all great, and what does it mean to you and I to awaken, to be enlightened, to birth the Christ? Because sometimes we throw around the word enlightenment or awakening the way we throw around the word love, right? Like, I love you, but I love pizza too, right? So what are we awakening to? What is it that is happening? So a man by the name of Nirmala defined spiritual enlightenment, and he said, it's the complete dissolution of one's identity as a separate self, with no trace of the egoic mind remaining. And this sets the bar very high, and it means that very few people become enlightened. So we look at Buddha, we look at Jesus, we look at our teachers. Enlightened is a noun, it's something that's happened. But awakening is a verb, it's something that we're doing, right? So awakening is an active process that we are engaged in. And it's what Jesus was talking about. He talked about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, over and over again. You know, a mustard seed, grows into a large bush. Or, he kept talking about the kingdom of heaven as if it were leaven in bread, that it just keeps expanding. So we're talking about this expansion of consciousness. So an awakening is a sudden increase of overall consciousness in the individual is experiencing. So here in life, we can have small awakenings, right? And then we can have really big awakenings. So a small awakening might be an insight, or it's like, oh, I have this idea and I can move toward this. And a big awakening is like maybe the birth of your child. When you get hit in the heart, the way you get hit in the heart when a child is born. Or something, you're touched by the stars or the moon or the sea, and something really grasps us. So we can have big awakenings and we can have small awakenings. And he speaks to the idea of spiritual practice. And here's the deal, is that you can sit down and meditate and have a process that you do, and then you do it and it's like, wow, I've just really connected, I'm one with the universe, I got it. And then maybe the next day you sit down, you do the same exact thing, and nothing happens. Does that ever happen to you? Where it's like, boom. And then another time it's like, you don't do anything, and boom, you have these shifts in consciousness and these shifts of awakening. And again, Imala said that consciousness can and sometimes does shift from connected states of fear, anger, or hurt to expanded states of peace and joy in an instant. But unfortunately, it can shift in the other direction just as fast, because consciousness is not in a fixed state. So the journey to Bethlehem, this Christmas story, is a template, if you will, for awakening, which we will go over on Christmas Eve in the candlelighting service, right? It's Mary saying yes. It's us saying yes to the possibilities that are in life. It's developing wisdom and guidance represented by the wise men. It's the practice of prayer and meditation represented by the shepherds, and then finally the birth of the Christ by love and awe. Nirmala said, spiritual awakening is a kind of flowering of consciousness. And while there are as many kinds of awakenings as there are flowers, they are equally mysterious. So he shares this idea of, you plant a garden and you plant flowers, and you work them, right? You fertilize them, you give them water, and you're hoping that the flowers are going to be amazing. But the truth is we only have so much control, because maybe there's too much sun or not enough sun, or maybe there's a drought. And so you can do your work, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the flower will bloom. Ask any gardener. If it works every time to water and weed, and does it work every time to water, weed, and fertilize a plant? Or does a plant sometimes fail to flower no matter how well it is cared for? But does that mean that you never water or fertilize the plant? So with our consciousness, we need to water and fertilize our hearts, our awakening. So it's the same with spiritual practice. We may think that we have the formula, and then every time we sit down to meditate, that we're going to have the same experience of expansion and awakening again. But this is like thinking you will always have a bumper crop of marigolds every time you plant them. And we still do the practice, right? So how do we have this experience of love, of awe, of expanding shifts in consciousness, and of kindness? Marcus Aurelius said, dwell on the beauty of life, watch the stars, and see yourself dancing with them. So what is it for you that causes awe where you have these experiences of awe. We are so fortunate in that we live in this amazingly beautiful place in the country where we can be in the mountains or we can be at the sea, and there's so many hidden places that are just waiting for us to have this experience of awe, right? And so what is it that we're focusing on so that we can help nurture, that we can fertilize, that we can water these kinds of experiences? Even in the news, you know, to look for those stories that help us feel that experience of awe. For instance, you know, I think 3 astronauts just came back from being up in a space station for like 6 months, you know, and an American, a Russian, and I don't know who else, but it's like, imagine how their whole consciousness must have shifted during that time that they were up there. And they come back here, and they can't help but affect the rest of us, right? And so there's these amazing, miraculous things that are happening all the time in the world. And our duty, our job, whatever it is that you want to call it, is to step into that. Since, as Chardin said, that if God is, you know, it's the upward and the downward, and it's through us, the momentum is through us, and it's the Christification of the species, then how do we jump into that flow? How do we jump into that flow to change? So the Christmas story is an initiation to the cosmic man. The Christmas story is an initiation to the cosmic woman. Can you see yourself as a cosmic woman? Just stop for a minute. Are you a cosmic woman? Are you a cosmic man? I mean, own that. What does that feel like for you? Because it's the truth of who we are. It's another word for the Christ. So may the upward and downward movement be united in the forward movement as we flow out from God. And again, Chardin said that when we really harness love, then we will have discovered fire for the second time in the world. And imagine the changes and the things that could happen with that. So in closing, I just want to share with you a brief poem by Khalil Gibran. He is my favorite poet. So I invite you just to turn your attention within. Oftentimes we call life bitter names, but only when we ourselves are bitter and dark. And we deem her empty and unprofitable, but only when the soul goes wandering in desolate places and the heart is drunk with over-mindfulness of self. Life can be veiled and hidden, even as your greater self is veiled and hidden. Yet when life speaks, all the winds become words. And when she speaks again, the smiles upon your lips and the tears in your eyes turn also into words. And when she sings, when life sings, the deaf hear and are held. And when life comes walking, the sightless behold her and are amazed and follow her in wonder and in astonishment. So our prayer as we move into this Christmas celebration is that we awaken, that we experience a shift in consciousness that is expanded and filled with heart, with love, with kindness, and with compassion. For Jesus said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So may we have the eyes of spirit to see one another, to see beyond outer appearances, and to see into the cosmic woman and the cosmic man. And may we stand in this and walk boldly into the future. And it is for this awareness and in the name and through the power of the living Spirit of truth that we do say thank you and amen.